Let's talk.
Charles Brown.
My Neighbour, the Dictator, Coming of Age in the Shadow of Indonesia's 1965 military coup. It is a book that seizes when there's a power seizure in Jakarta, and it is a book that chronicles the changing of a life. It is the book by Tari Lang, and I'm delighted to say that Tari Lang joins me live on the line now. Tari, good morning to you.
Good morning, Giles. Lovely to be with you.
Pleasure is indeed all mine. For those who perhaps aren't too, if can't expression, hot on their sort of history and geography, just explain a little bit about sort of the background and if you like, your life leading up to 1965, please.
Okay, Indonesia is a massive country. It's the fourth largest populated in the world. So, but surprisingly, not a lot of people know about it in Europe. And in 1965, the president was a chap called Sukarno, who had been there since independence in 1945 from the Dutch. In 1965, Sukarno, who was kind of more left-wing rather than right-wing, was overtaken by a coup, and a general then started a period of dictatorship, which lasted for many, many years. And it was quite a brutal dictatorship. And I was 14 then. I was living a pretty comfortable life in the best street in Jakarta, a teenager, wanting to do all the stuff teenagers want to do. I have a British mother and an Indonesian father. They were very senior in Sukarno's government. And then my world turned upside down, and so did the world of the country. So the book really chronicles the next 4 years until I then left and moved back to my mother's family in London, when my parents were arrested, when so many people were so frightened about what was going on. But in the meantime, I was still trying to be a teenager, because I still liked parties and music and boys.
The thing is, of course, I mean, you say that Indonesia, not many people know it, but of course, sort of enough people know Bali now, don't they? I mean, I'm sitting in Marbella, and Marbella seems to be twinned with Bali. And the people are going to Dubai, they tend to be going to Bali. So it has sort of become a little more known. 1965, I mean, if we need to set it in the actual sort of time, as it were, in geopolitics, presumably this is a time when American involvement in that particular region of the world is ramping up. There is obviously China has undergone the Cultural Revolution, or was about to undergo the Cultural Revolution with Mao, and so it is a time of very worrying sort of geopolitics, and you can see why perhaps a more right of centre leader is going to come under favour from Washington, from Kissinger and whoever else, or from LBJ, because they're worried about the so-called domino effect.
Indeed, absolutely right. And the Americans and the Brits were indeed wooing Sukarno a lot, whereas he was veering towards the Chinese and Russia. And that was a cause of a lot of the tension. And in fact, a lot of the papers that have emerged subsequently have shown that the British and American intelligence services indeed had a hand in making these changes, or in being agents provocateurs in causing these changes in 1965. And that conversation is still being argued all around the world. But absolutely, that was the situation. So it's very, very febrile. The situation was very febrile. Sukarno had said that he hated the Brits and he hated the Americans, and the Brits and Americans saying, "But we love you, come to us." So it was very tense. So yes, you're right. The time was right for a right-wing military dictatorship to take over, and boy, did they take over in a big way. I mean, a million people were killed in the period after that. I mean, it is an unbelievable number, and more than 1 million people were made political prisoners, including my parents, including my British mother and my Indonesian father. So it was a terrifying time.
And yet, you know, it is one of the situations where this is undocumented. I mean, we know about, you know, the massacre of Polish officers in the fields, you know, in the forests of Code. We know about the atrocities, obviously, of what happened in the camps, you know, the Nazi camps in Poland. We know about the killing fields of Cambodia because of the film, etc. But Indonesia, again, it is and with the greatest respect to the country, because it's, you know, and of a previous carnation, it's been the Dutch East Indies. It's been that whole, hasn't it? It's been that thing as well. It's been, it is as if you like, it has been overlooked and forgotten. And again, at this period of sort of political Machiavellism of the highest order, the gaze of the world has been on Korea, has been on China. It will be on Vietnam, Indochina very, very shortly in a massive way. And so this right-wing government, in the same way that the death squads in El Salvador and Honduras can get away with it, but that, you know, I mean, what happens in Indonesia is far, far worse on a far greater scale.
It's an enigma to me. I don't understand why, actually, because even as a tourist destination that would normally increase a country's reputation, it hasn't, because there are the most amazing. There's 13,000 islands. There are landscapes. There are wildlife. There's food. There's dancing. There's everything. So I really don't understand why it's not on the agenda. So I mean, in a way, I'm hoping books like mine will actually put Indonesia back on the agenda, because actually there are real people living there and trying to have an ordinary, lovely time and not able to do so.
Yeah, but the problem with that is you can maybe point to that when, you know, General Westmoreland leaves Vietnam, and he says, oh, well, the thing is that, you know, Vietnamese don't value life in the same way that we in Europe do, which is a completely racist thing to say. But you understand that, and Tari, you must have seen that and awfully probably witnessed it and had it yourself. It's just the way that the Western powers kind of look at that area.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, certainly the Western powers see, as we know, but that's what geopolitics is about. Western power sees countries as pawns on a chessboard. But I think the interesting thing is, in a lot of the other countries, the knowledge about what happens in those countries actually it improves the familiarity, and so therefore people actually ask questions, which people don't about Indonesia.
At the same time as all this going on, you're a 14-year-old schoolgirl with a liking. With a liking for the Rolling Stones and boys and stuff. So how do how does one? I mean, it's bad enough being a teenager at the best of times, but to be a teenager and then have I don't know, the guy in the fifth form isn't talking to me, and you can't get the latest Rolling Stones record, and then the next thing you know, there's a military coup going on. So that's talk about. I mean, I've got, I live with a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old. It was a birthday last week, but what I'm saying is, they go through teenage angst as it is at the moment. But teenage angst in 1965, when your country's undergoing a revolution, must be quite something.
Well, it is, and you don't know how you would deal with situations. Had I been living in had I been your daughter, Giles, maybe I would have been slightly different because of the circumstances. So you live towards that, and I've always been brought up with the point of view that actually, if there's something that needs to be done, get on and do it. And I also joined the resistance, and I also prepared safe houses for people who were in hiding and delivered, because I like to be busy. So I was quite a busy girl, actually, in those days, interestingly.
Yeah, I mean, but so was it just literally one morning, one night you went to bed, humming, Paint It Black to yourself or something like that, and then the next minute you woke up and there were tanks on the street and your parents had gone? I mean, explain, because we always talk about the grand sweep, don't we, but we never actually talk about we talk about, I don't know, Tet Offensive or whatever, but we never talk about what it was like. I went to bed one night and I woke up and and everything had changed. Was that the case?
Well, actually, it is literally like that. I woke up one morning and there was a little roundabout in front of our house, and I looked out of the window and there were 2 tanks and jeeps and soldiers standing there. And I thought, this is weird, because the tanks are on the flowers. They're ruining the flowers. What the hell are they doing? So I told my mother, and the reason that all of that was happening was that, and the reason the title of the book is My Neighbour, the Dictator, Suharto actually lived in my neighborhood. So therefore, my whole area became the epicenter of this coup. And one of the generals that were being murdered the previous night lived down the street from me. So it was a very, very sudden, not just a moment, but also the placing of it was very sudden. And everything took over. The newspapers got shut down. Soldiers started roaming the streets. And everything turned literally on its own within a day.
So your parents, were they taken? I mean, when we say people are being shot, I mean, they're being taken away and dealt with and dispatched, or is it happening on people's front?
They were, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, my father was arrested, and he was arrested and released three times. And overall, he was in prison for 13 years. And my mother was in prison for 3.5 years. And it was only released when the British government then intervened and got her back to London. So yeah, people tip up. I was arrested one night, and my boyfriend was tortured, and they didn't touch me, but I saw him being tortured. So those are experiences that you live with and inform your life, but then you need to deal with the best way you can without forgetting that you're just a normal person trying to live a normal life. But so many people are going through the same problems. When
you said you did stuff for the resistance, I mean, were you aware of the possible consequences of this? Or because I know when we were teenagers, we're full of, we're all, fight them on the streets, and it's all very romantic and very exciting, the last, I think the most thing I ever did was go on a CND rally, but you see, but you have ideals and things. But when you're getting involved with something like this, there is, people are dying in droves here. People are disappearing.
They are.
And so were you aware? Were you? I mean, you said just matter of factly. I saw my boyfriend talk with. I mean, was that on purpose in front of you, or was it you just have?
It was no. Oh. I was brought in, and I was brought in to watch him being tortured in order to encourage him to speak. And so, yes, I mean, I was arrested, and for that very purpose. So people were doing things to other people that were just unspeakable. And you're right, as a teenager, all of that is happening around you. But you do have this kind of thing that, it'll all be all right, and it'll be fine. So I will carry on doing this, because you have this kind of confidence in youth. And you're absolutely right. It didn't occur to me that I might get caught. As it happened, I didn't. But, lots of people were, so I could have been, but it just didn't occur to me at the time. And I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't doing anything violent. I was just preparing safe houses. I was hiding in the villages. I was delivering messages, those sorts of things. But there were still subversive activities that could have ended badly, or even worse.
Was there any sort of, did you have, you said it was one night you went to, you woke up one morning and there are tanks in the flower beds, which is, upset the gardener. During, when Spain had its civil war, you saw families suddenly turn against each other. You saw, communities being ripped apart. Was there very much a question of that? I mean, did you see, the people who you thought were on your, people who you think were political at all? Did you suddenly think that they suddenly get involved? Because people will leap on a bandwagon. People will say, oh, well, if I had been in this situation, I would have done what you did. I would set up a safe house. But 9 out of 10 times, Tari, people will look after number one first, and pardon the expression, but muck the rest of them. So were there people who suddenly changed from being sort of pro-democratic to suddenly we have to do this because we have to stop the encroaching communist threat, etc.?
Absolutely right. And one of the big provocations that the intelligence services were doing was to set neighbors against each other. And we see how easy it is. I mean, there are neighbors setting against each other in Europe today. So, in fact, a lot of the killings were carried out by people that people knew. I mean, there's an amazing film called The Act of Killing, made by Joshua Oppenheimer, that explores this ability of people to suddenly turn on their neighbors because, exactly as you say, it's going to save me, it's going to give me something better. So therefore, if I call you a communist, that's it. That's all that needs to happen. Yeah.
Just a timeline. Your father's been arrested 3 times. Your mother's done 3.5. Is doing 3.5 in a prison. So where are you staying? Is there a family? Are there people looking after you? I mean, how does that? And brothers and sisters, for example. I mean, are you an only child? Is there? I
have a younger brother who's 5 years younger, so he was obviously much smaller, and we managed to keep our house until we left for London for the next 4 years, because my parents knew enough people who could, quote, protect, in other words, put protection notices on the house. Right. So I could still stay in the house, and I did have family. But at the end of the day, the responsibility, and remember that in those days, where people were they didn't have enough prisons for political prisoners. prisoners because they didn't anticipate this number. So they had to build camps in order to house them. And there was not enough food. So you had to still send food because otherwise people will actually starve. So I had to organize a rota for people to send in food to both my parents, who were obviously, to make matters worse, in different camps. So it had to be two trips. So all of that needed organizing. Now, I was grateful that we could keep the house, so we basically rented out half of it to make money, and we had to make money as money started to run out because obviously my parents weren't earning anymore.
Were there whispers of what was happening to opponents? Or did that come out later? I mean, and were you aware of the scale, or did that only come to ghastly light later on?
Well, weirdly, of course, the knowledge of what's going on comes through my parents because people hear this. The prisons become sort of hotbed of information. But all people were coming in and telling stories of what's happening in the areas. So actually, I got only information was from what my parents told us that their other co-prisoners were hearing from their families. And of course, the serious extent of what happened in 1965 only came out much, much later. And Suharto was in power for 33 years. That's a long time of controlling the media, where you couldn't have conversations like this at all. Where there was no social media, there was nothing. And if you shut down newspapers, there's no news. It's very simple.
Yeah. What was the sort of final straw? Is it like to leave when you left? So when you're 19, is it your mother comes out of prison and you made a decision? Right, we have to leave now.
No, they were both still in prison. My mother's family had called it a day. They were all in London. They said it's enough. You cannot leave these two. And I said I'm fine. By this stage I'm like grown up.
Of course you are. You're 19. You know everything. Yeah, come on.
Surely, I know. I knew everything at 14, so I knew even more at 19. And my parents then also saw that actually, I needed to concentrate on schoolwork, and I needed to, on my education and my brother, and it was starting to get untenable because money was really running out. So the family decided against my wishes, but I didn't argue too much because I knew actually realistically we could not have sustained this much longer. So my brother and I went off on a plane and arrived in London, and then carried on here, and then obviously carried on the campaigning in London in order to get my mother released, because at the time she was still in prison. So we did this through legal means, through the British government, and she was released about a year later.
What, I mean, did people even know about this going on in the UK? Because again, it's 1965. So, well, no, this is the late 60s now.
No, 69, yeah.
69. So I mean, Vietnam is front and centre. It's we've had the Paris Spring the year before. It's kind of love and peace, man. But are people aware? Are they even? Or is it very frustrating for you, Tari, to try and to make people aware of what's going on?
Very frustrating, because I mean, when people say where you come from, you actually have to explain where Indonesia is.
Yeah.
And and you think, look at the map; it's massive. But it is frustrating, and I think that not much has changed. I mean, people still. You're absolutely right. People know Bali. Bali is a country, isn't it? No, So that still continues. Yes, exactly.
So when was your father released then? I mean, that would be like the mid-70s then, or? Wow. Late 70s.
Yeah. It was late 70s when he was released. And he then also eventually came to London and lived in London. But that was a long separation, and for him it was tough. Although he was the most amazing, resilient man, but even for him it was pretty tough. And so he moved to London and stayed with us. So both he and my mother were here. Although obviously things have moved apart from them so much that they actually very sadly divorced. So it affects families in all sorts of ways, and the reverberations continue even after supposedly the main problem has been resolved.
And presumably you couldn't go back to Indonesia while the dictator was still there, because he might have known.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So how did you end up in, because you now, according to my notes, you now spend your time between Paris and Edinburgh. Now, I have Scottish family, so therefore, and the last time I looked, there wasn't an awful lot you could draw a line between Bali or between Jakarta and Jedburgh, for example. So how did you manage to pull that trick off?
Well, I mean, Edinburgh is very easy. I married a Scotsman, and he sort of suggested Edinburgh, and I thought, well, why not? I mean, it doesn't matter where I live, because I have lived in all sorts of different places. So we lived in Edinburgh, and we started going. We've been going to France for a long time. We know lots of friends, and we thought, well, actually, why don't we spend half our time there? And so we do that, and it's great. And of course, especially since online living is been much more of the norm, it's much easier to do that. But I love it. I mean, Edinburgh's full of culture, so you've got to come back, Giles. You come back and visit.
Absolutely. Well, but apparently you're involved with the Lyceum Theatre as well. And as a failed drama student myself, I mean, obviously that's you're ticking all the boxes, Tari. Why did you decide the time was right? Why did the time was right? I mean, I to be honest, I've not come across a book like this and I read a lot, so it's really fascinating. So, was it to give that sort of the bird's eye view, the on the ground perspective that wasn't, that doesn't have the global sweep as we were, and at the same time, it's not written by the daughter of one of the officials and one of the my father the dictator or my uncle the dictator, because again we tend to get things from from so and so's daughter, don't we? Chairman Mao's sister or something like that. So why did you decide? I mean, it's a fascinating story, well written. So why did what was the spark, the chispa to?
Well, I didn't actually decide to write a book. The reason the book's written the way it is that I thought I'd write a letter to my kids. So after I'm dead, they could find this letter telling them the sorts of things I got up to. And my husband then read it because I showed it to him, and he said, "Look, this isn't a letter. This is a book. I think you need to turn it into a big book." So that's why the style is very much a storytelling, because that's what it was in the beginning, and that was what was important to me. That we know what happens to ordinary people. I mean, as you say, not children of dictators, but my parents were very, very active politically and very active in their social life. So I could draw on that experience without actually having to be the daughter of a celebrity. Not being a nepo baby.
Yes. Well, apart from that, what are you hoping that people are going to discover from the book My Neighbour the Dictator?
I think, first of all, to know that there's a country called Indonesia that's sitting in that part of the world, and it's wonderful.
And it's not just Bali.
It's not just Bali.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. Second of all, something awful happened there in 1965 that actually people should know about. And actually, if you look at the world today, a lot of what happened there is being repeated or starting to appear. This whole thing about neighbors against neighbors, riots, imprisonment without due process in many parts of the world. So actually, it might have happened 60 years ago, but it's coming back, people, and you really need to be aware and pay attention of what people are doing to your voice and your agency.
The book is called My Neighbour the Dictator, Coming in Age in the Shadow of Indonesia's 1965 military coup. It's by the brilliant Tari Lang. Tari, if people want to find you online and say nice things to you, do you have a website? Do you have a social media presence? Where can people find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram a lot, and it's Tari_Lang, and all of the other normals apart from X. Obviously, and it's all in all most major online and in-person outlets.
Indeed, support your local bookstore. But if you go to our own virtual bookstore on the website, you'll see the front cover, which is, I presume, that's a picture of you on the front cover as well.
It is. I was 14, and buy it through Giles, people. Through your website.
Through the what? Yes. Go to tre.radio, click on the book, and it will wing its way to you. The book is called My Neighbour the Dictator. It's by Tari Lang. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you this morning.
Lovely speaking to you, Giles.